Today, we are going to wrap up what we've been working through about the Lord's Prayer. That Jesus did not pick these words haphazardly or accidentally or kind of fumbled his way through this, but why these words were chosen, why they carry so much weight, and why we really, really need to think about what we're saying when these words just so easily roll off the tongue. We've worked our way through each of these steps looking at the weight of what we're actually praying, what we're actually asking for when we say these words in this prayer that Jesus said. Today, we come to lead us not into temptation. So if you go ahead and go to Matthew 6, the Lord's Prayer starts in verse 9 where Jesus says, okay, so pray like this. And he goes in, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, which is where we land today. We know the most important thing. We start with, we have a Father in heaven. Everything else flows out of that. Everything else comes from the starting realization that we have Abba, Father, in heaven on our behalf. Everything else flows out of that. Today, as we look at this, and we look at this idea of leading us not into temptation, but delivering us from evil. It is a hard thing. It really is. And there's all kinds of very deep thought and scholarly arguments and different things. You may have seen this in the news lately. The Pope of the Catholic Church right now has actually authorized for them to change the wording of the Lord's Prayer, to remove this lead us not into temptation, and to change that out where it doesn't say lead us not into temptation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to end with this same slide that we're starting with. We're going to talk about what does lead us mean, what is temptation, what is evil, how does it all fit together? And I'll go ahead and say, I understand, and I had this conversation this week. I got to spend a few days at Lipscomb and had this conversation with another preacher there and had the same kind of feelings about, we get the idea, we get the reason behind that thought, but I think that there's more to it, which is what we'll look at today. There's a few verses in here I'm going to ask if you take notes, if that's something that you do, if you take notes in the handout or you write in the margin of your Bible or in your phone or whatever it is, write down this Psalm 19:13 and Psalm 73. We're not going to go through those today, but those are ones that I would love for you to work through at the end of this, specifically looking at, we're going to go to James, how Psalm 73 relates to the message of James chapter 1, how James and Psalm 73 look at this issue. But we're going to start in James chapter 1. Now, it says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It's important. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. James chapter 1. Starting in verse 2, count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded, unstable in his ways. Verse 9, let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the field he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching heat, withers the grass, its flowers falls, and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Now, verse 5 said, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously. Verse 12, I believe, is the answer to that prayer of verse 5. Verse 12, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Verse 13, this is important. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So we start with, in Matthew 6:13, a prayer. Jesus is saying, pray to the Father like this, lead us not into temptation. James says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. God does not tempt. So where are we? How does this work? How can these two things be put together? How can we pray, lead us not into temptation, and then have James say, don't ever say that God is tempting you? I think largely we find it in Deuteronomy 8, and I would love, turn there with me, and we're going to look through this whole piece because it's that important. No coincidence, the chapter title, the chapter heading that we've added to Deuteronomy 8 is Remember the Lord Your God, the theme for everything and everything walking through this Lord's Prayer. Deuteronomy chapter 8. The whole commandment that I command you today, you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers. You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness. Remember, give us this day, each day, our daily bread, walking through that. Remember that as we look at this. Verse 2 still. That he might humble you, testing you to know what is in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger, and he fed you with manna, which you did not know, and nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone. But man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing didn't wear out, your foot didn't swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciples his son, the Lord disciplines you. As a parent disciplines a child, the Lord disciplines you. Verse 6. So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. We spent a lot of time on that. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks, of water, of fountains and springs flowing in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees, pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of those hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. None of that rings of punishment. None of that sounds as punishment. We just heard about the testing and the discipline, and we go right into the overwhelming abundance of where God is taking them. Verse 11. This will sound familiar as well. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply and your silver and your gold is multiplied and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you water out of the rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. That's our anchor. That's our keynote for this. That he might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God. For it is God who gives you the power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant as he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God and you go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I warn you today, you shall surely perish. Right there at the tail end of 16, verse 16, says God, so that he might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. If you have children, your children, adopted children, stepchildren, grandchildren, children that you care for, children that are in your care and that you are responsible for in some way, you know fully that though we might call it something different, though it might look different, though parents might disagree back and forth on the extent of it, we all test our children. We do not test our children because we want them to fail. We don't test our children because we want them to do something terrible or cause great hardship. We test our children because we want them to have the greatest possible shot. We have a saying that we've used for decades, and it's certainly not new with us. Everyone has used it with decades, especially with teenagers. If you haven't decided how you are going to react in a situation before you get there, guess what? It's too late. We test them so that when something will arrive, they have already seen the test. They've already been tested. They know how to respond. The tests are different at different levels, but they are all tested in ways that we are teaching our children to be safe, to be wise, to be able to make good decisions when something comes up, to make safe decisions when something comes up. We test our children. The tests increase and get more important and more serious the older, or at least the more mature, that your children get. Because we know that the tests that are coming later get more important and more serious. We know that the consequences are scarier and more frightening. And so as the maturity goes up, we don't stop testing. The tests evolve. And it's an important part of parenting. In Deuteronomy 8, it lays out this idea that as we discipline our children, the Lord disciplines us. As we test our children, the Lord tests us. God tempts not. It's over and over. God tempts not. Do not say that you are tempted by God. It is the own evil desire that's already in you. God tests. God refines. God takes us to places to test us to see who we are, for us to see who God is. God takes us to places where we will be tested so that we will remember who God is. God takes us to place of refining moments. And we know that refining is done in fire. God takes us to places of refining so that later on we can remember that as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood in the fire, there was someone else there too. God didn't throw ice water on the fire. He didn't put it out. He didn't lock the door. He let them go in, but he stood with them. And it's so later in life when other trials and when real temptation comes, we can remember that during the trials and the tests and the refining, who God was and where God was with us. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, behold, I will refine them and test them, for what else can I do because of my people? You, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. The crucible is for silver and the furnace is for gold, but Yahweh tests the heart. It's this process of firing and beating and firing and beating something to remove impurities in order to make it stronger and stronger and stronger. I will put this third into the fire and refine them as one refines silver and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord is my God. 1 Peter chapter 12. Verses 12 through 14 is, Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. 15 and 18, look at that, read that, process that. It boils to, don't sin as a result of these trying situations. It is a test, it is not a temptation. It is a test to reveal and to strengthen you. It is not meant to tempt you and make you fall. Therefore, verse 19, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. As we say over and over again, and remind myself over and over again, and remind each other over and over again, this is all because we have a Creator that we can trust with us. Look at this one again. I will put this third into the fire, and I will refine them as one refines silver. Test them as gold is tested. Remove the impurities, make it stronger, and they will call upon my name, and I will answer. It's not a separating, it's a drawing in. It's a bringing near. It is a refining, strengthening, renewing process of us not becoming some self-enlightened, important people, but in remembering who God was and where God was when we were in the fire and couldn't do anything about it on our own. And so we will call upon the name of the Lord, and I will answer, and I will say, they are my people, and they will say, you are my God. So here's the thing. With the lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. We can know that, we can know the words, I count it all as loss. We can know on the other side, talking about the pain and the trials, count it all as joy. We can know that. And we can know that gold is only gold after it is tested, and silver only becomes pure after it is fired and tested and forged and refined. We can know that. And we can know that we want that end product. We can know that we want to be refined. We can know that we want to be pruned. We can know that we want the end product of the chiseling. Remember that skit we did several years ago? Kevin Reeves did it. We did the God's chisel. But all of those things, we're also scared of the process. I'm scared of the process. There have been many, many dark and trying times in my life that because of those times, now when something else comes up, I can look back and remember God was there in that. He is certainly here in this. That does not mean I would love to go through that phase again. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I don't believe we have to remove, from the book of Levi's opinions, I do not believe we have to remove, don't lead us into. I understand the sentiment, because God does not lead us into being tempted. I think we just have to understand what is saying here. We are being led into a place where temptation will occur. We are being tested. But as the saying goes, it says, God tests for our benefit. God tests to make us look like God. Satan tempts to destroy. Very different things. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. We know that God will lead us there, and we know that in those moments we will be tested, we will be fired, we will be tried, and we will come out better, but it's still scary, and we still ask to be delivered from the evil one. God, I know that there is nothing like your refining fire for a believer. There is nothing like it. But I still don't really want to go there. But when it's necessary for me to go to be tested, deliver me from the temptation of the evil one. Martin Luther said this. I'm going to read this quote because it's too good for this to miss or to mess up. Martin Luther, in wrestling with this same text, came to this closing. He says, temptation is the best school into which a Christian can ever enter. Yet, in itself, apart from the grace of God, it is so unbelievably hazardous that this prayer should be offered every day. Lead us not into temptation. Or if we must enter it, Lord, please deliver us from the evil one. We are refined by fire, and God does not tempt anyone with evil. We do not tempt our children with evil. We do test our children because we care deeply about their future. We care deeply about their ability to live this life. God tests his children because God cares deeply about how we live this abundant life, bringing heaven to earth, bringing God's kingdom, praying God's kingdom come, praying God's will be done right here, right now, in all of this. God cares deeply about that, and so God tests. Satan tempts. Lord, lead us not into temptation. We know it's good for us. We still don't like it. And when we do go there, God, when we are led there, God, the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness. Satan showed up. The accuser came and tempted. Was it God or Satan? Yes. That's scary. It's a lot to wrestle. It really is. But God, when we are tried, when you are making me better, when you are making me stronger, when you are making me stronger by knowing your strength and my weakness, when you are making me remember that I can do all things through Christ, when you are making me remember that in temptation I will never face more than I can handle because you will give a way out from under the evil one. Do that. Give me a way out and deliver me from the evil one in those moments. Don't let the sinful, selfish, evil desire that already resides in me, that you did not give me and you did not bring me, take over in my moments of trial. Deliver me from the evil one. Deliver me from myself in those moments so that I come out looking more like you, so that the Spirit can refine me and make me look more like you. I hope that the Lord's Prayer, this may have been all information that some of you already completely knew, deeply, intimately. But I still hope that it reminds us. I learned a lot personally, deeply, in studying and looking through the weight of the words that I just rolled right off at football games and whatever, wherever I happened to be. I learned a lot of the weight of what I was actually asking for. And so my prayer is that we take up the Lord's Prayer. We do use the Lord's Prayer. We do diligently, honestly, deeply, intimately pray the Lord's Prayer, knowing full well what we are praying for and what we are entering in for and what we are asking for from Abba, Father. This morning, I'm going to say a prayer in just a minute, and Mark will come after that and lead us in a song, and we will all pray. And we will pray for a different kingdom to come. Here, right now. Not in the future, not at some far off place, right here, right now. We will pray for God's will to come, not knowing what that is, or what that will look like, or what that will mean for us. We will pray that we are forgiven as we have forgiven those who have sinned against us, out of the great abundance of forgiveness that we have been extended. And we will pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, yours, not mine, not here, yours is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. While Mark leads us in a song, if we can pray for you in any way, we would love to do that. There'll be a couple people down here front. There'll be some men and women on the back wall. There are people next to you in the pews. Step out, grab somebody, ask for prayer. Something specific or not. Just let us, maybe you just need someone to sit silently, be with you for a minute while you pray. If you have questions about our family, this body right here in this building and the body around the world and around Oak Ridge, we would love to answer questions about that, and more than anything else, we would love to talk Jesus. Abba, Father. The Father that you do have in heaven, who is just asking, I just want you to come home. I want you to know who I am. Not who you've been told who I am, not who you think. I want you to intimately know who I am. The God of mercy, of steadfast love, of justice, of righteousness, of peace, that just wants you to come home. Grab me or anyone in here, Ray, Johnny, Kevin, Aaron, Fanny, Joanne, anybody who's down front, who's on the back, who's sitting next to you, and let's talk about it and pray with it and wrestle with it and work through thoughts and questions that you have. Pray with me, please. God, we thank you. We thank you for the daily bread that we are given daily. We thank you that you know your creation, that you call a masterpiece so intimately that you know that we need daily bread because otherwise we would just forget. God, we know that in our system of wealth and privilege, and honestly, we can largely go through a lot of days without ever even being forced to think about you. We are the one in Deuteronomy 8 in the promised land. We are the one in Proverbs 31 that says, don't let me get to a place where I can think I've done this on my own. Don't let me get to a place where things are good, so I don't know if I need you anymore. God, when we must face temptation, when we must face trials, when we must face tests, to be refined, to look more like you, because that is what we have submitted to look more like you. Father, let us see the way out that you always give. Deliver us from the evil one. and help us to remember that we are after your kingdom and your will, not mine, not ours, not Highland Views, not Oak Ridge, not the U.S., like your kingdom